Hey guys, welcome back. Let's jump into some sequential function charts. And these are something that, we've already looked at these in the past and we know that they're very structured and they're very rigidly defined. But in this environment, I will say that they are a joy to work with. So let me go ahead and set up a program and show you what I mean. Let's right click over here, add our project. We're going to call this guy, of course, SFC1. Let's make sure that we're defining an SFC. Hit OK. And then let's come back over here into our PLC program and let's make a call for that. So SFC1 semicolon. Then we can close that, maximize this one, and we're good to go. Now to start with, we've already got one block and one transition in there, so that should look pretty familiar after going through RSLogix 5000. But from there, things are a little bit different as far as how to set these up and give them actions. They're very, very, very functional in here. You've got different types of actions you can define. And also, instead of just dropping in some structured text, it makes it very easy to jump into any of the other paradigms for one of these steps. So let's start off with some of the basic stuff here. If I come up here, you can see I've got these two buttons, step and transition after, step and transition before. So whatever I've got selected, I can put another one of these combinations before or after what I've already got. Then I've also got alternative branch right or alternative branch left. So I can actually add another optional branch going out from one of these steps. And then we've got parallel branch right or left. So we can have two different chains going down from the left or from the right. So we've got, the same flexibilities. Then over here, we've got a straight jump. We've got a transition jump, which is kind of what you're looking at right here. So how do we do this? Well, let's start by just doing some simple stuff. I'm going to go ahead and add a step transition after, and you can see that does exactly what we would expect. Now, when you're editing these things, there's something tricky I want you to be aware of. If I just click on this and hit the delete button, nothing happens. If I just click down here on this transition and I hit the delete key, nothing happens. So how do you delete something and how do you change it once you've already got it? Well, if I select the step, I hold down Control, and then I also select the transition. Now that I have both of those selected in a pair, I can hit delete and I can get rid of it. So that's something that if you don't know that, it's going to frustrate you later on. You're going to just get stuck on that. So make sure you understand that you have to have a step and a transition selected in order to delete them. Dragging and dropping and moving things around in here doesn't really work. So I can't take this and move it off somewhere else. This structure in here is very, very, very rigid. So whenever you're working with this, there's not a lot that you can do. And actually, that's kind of a good thing because it forces you into, programming with the set structure just the way it is. And it takes a lot of the guesswork out of things for us. So let's go ahead and get started getting into some programming in here and seeing what we can do. First of all, I'm up in this INIT step. So this is going to be presumably initiation for this sequence. And if I just go ahead and double click into here, look what pops up. This is a pretty familiar looking menu. It gives us all of our different paradigm options and says, how do you want to program this step? So that's nice. I can just come in here to, whichever one. And let's say I want to create some ladder logic. And when I click it, you notice I've got a ladder logic environment in front of me, but over here on the left, I did not create a new program. So this isn't some actual program that we're creating outside of our SFC. This is just program inside that step of our SFC. So once I get to that step, this is where I would put all the action, all the logic that's happening within there. But there's one piece of code that definitely has to be there. You see this coming transition, which is called trans 2. I can rename that transition if I want to. I can make it anything. I can call it, transition 2 or go to step 3 or just whatever I want to call it. But there's one thing that has to happen inside of my INIT program. I need to energize a bool that's called trans 2. And once I do energize that bool, then I'm going to fire this transition and I'm going to come down to step 3. There's one other condition that has to be true before I can make that jump. And if I just come over here and right click somewhere, you see I've got this time overview. Well, I've got a list of steps right here, and I've got my init step, step 3, and step 2. And for each one, I can optionally define a minimal time and a maximal time. So let's pretend that I've energized the transition to step 2, but I have not yet fulfilled my minimal time. Well, then I'm going to wait until both of those conditions have been met before I proceed to step 3. So if you're working with time, then you have to do both. You have to define what the minimal amount of time is you can be in this step, and then you also have to engage your transition bool. After that, yes, it'll proceed to step 3. But if you haven't defined time, as soon as you hit your trans 2, then it's going to go ahead and jump in. So that's how we get from step 2 to step 3, all the way down here. And when we get to this last jump, you see down here it says init. Well, we can figure out what that means pretty simply. Once we hit transition 1, the next time it comes in here and scans this SFC, we're going to start over again up here at the top. Well, if we really want that to be a true initialization, we don't ever want it to run that again. So we can come down here and type out step 3. Now, this will only happen at the very beginning whenever we first start our program. And after that, when this finishes, it'll come back to step 3 and it'll keep running this loop right here. So we'll never hit initialization again. So that's an option, and that's how this jump works. You just name your step right down here, and that's where it sends you. So that again also makes it really easy. Coming over here, I can click on this and go ahead and add a branch out. And then from there, I can jump in and add another step after. So you can see I can create some different options coming out of here. And same thing right here. Maybe if I've got another optional step, I can go ahead and plug that in. So I can go to step 3, come to either 5 or 4, and then both of them come back down to 2. So that's one way that you can create alternate branches of logic. Let's delete all of those. And what else can we do as far as creating branches off? Well, I can create another transition, and then I can just create a jump. So once I hit this, I can make it jump back up here to init. I can make it run down here to step 2. I can make it go pretty much anywhere. And then let's go ahead and put one more block in here. And then once I get down to this transition, I can also jump off as well. So just using these buttons up here, you don't really get to do a lot of drag and drop or anything like that. But just using those buttons, you can pretty much define all kinds of your navigation through these charts. So it makes it really simple, even if we don't get to drag and drop, and that's painful for us because most of us love to drag and drop. So let's go ahead and set up just some basic, really simple little thing here. I'm going to create a test bool here, and I'll just call this bool 1. We'll define that as a bool, and then I'm going to energize our trans 2. And I have to define that as a bool even though the name of the transition already exists. So I close that and I come down here, and let's do the same thing for trans 1. So I'm going to jump in and go to a ladder as well, obviously understanding that we could use any other paradigm that we wanted for this. I will hit a 2, and this one's going to be for trans 1. We've got it. We can close out of here, and then I'm going to go ahead and delete one of these stages because we just don't need it. So let me select the step, select the transition, and hit delete. And then we've got something else called trans 1 down here, and it's not going to like that at all. So I'm going to go ahead and call that trans 0. Hit OK. And then inside of step 2, let's do the same thing, and we'll energize trans 0 this time. So we're going to give ourselves a bool 3 and come over here, and that's going to be trans 0, of course. Gotcha. Let's close out. So now that we've got this, we've actually got something that we can run. So let's come up here online and go into simulation mode. Log in, scans our program, no errors. And now I'm going to go ahead and run this guy. And right away you see we're inside of INIT. And you already know the logic that I put in here, so I really don't have to go and jump into the ladder and show you what's happening. I can come up here to bool 1 and let me send a true in, and as soon as I do, we jump to step 3. I'll release that bool, come down here to bool 2, make that true, and sure enough, we jump to step 2. So let me falsify that again. Come back to bool 3, and when I make this one true, you see we come back up to step 3 because that's what I have defined at the end of the jump. Now there's one last thing that I also want to show you in here before we go, and let's go ahead and jump out of here. And we've already seen that there's logic that you put into these steps, but there's actually 2 more pieces of logic that you can put into here. So if I right click on this, you see down here on this menu I have add entry action and add exit action. Well, I can add an entry action, so maybe that'll be, I don't know, a function block diagram, or let's call it whatever we want. I'll go ahead and make it an instruction list since we hate those. And I can create some kind of program in here that's going to happen immediately and only one time when we first get into this step. And then naturally I can also add an exit action, and maybe this will be structured text since we hate that one the second most. And now I've got an exit action. So just like that on this step, aside from being able to double click in the middle and get to my action, which is going to be happening continually as long as we're in this step, we can also create 2 other programs which will only happen when we first get to this step and right before we transition out of this step. So that's one other little interesting piece of these, and that's pretty standard, but at the same time I still wanted you to know that that's there because you never know, you just might need it in the next project. So that's how this thing works. It's very simple, and everything else that you really need to know is programming in the other paradigms. As long as you know how to set up these steps, how to create your navigation, and how to energize your transitions, you know everything you need to know about SFCs in Automation Builder. So that makes this really, really simple. And with that overview, you already know how to write programs using this paradigm. So come back in the next lecture and I will give you your next mission. See you then.